the name and the case that we all remember, Amanda Knox.
Who is Amanda Knox? Is she the innocent, fun-loving American student she claims? Or a debauched and ruthless young woman?
She was studying abroad in Italy when she became the most talked about woman in the world.
In a case being watched so closely in Italy, America and Britain.
In 2007, Amanda Knox and her then boyfriend Raffaele Solicito became suspects in the murder of British student Meredith Kercher, who was Knox's roommate at the time.
Amanda Knox and her ex-boyfriend face murder and sexual violence charges in connection with the death of 21-year-old British student Meredith Kercher.
At just 20, she was thrust into the global spotlight and quickly dubbed Foxy Knoxy by the media.
Foxy Knoxy. It was a perfect headline.
And in 2008, Amanda, Raffaele and a third man, Rudy Gedde, were convicted of Meredith's murder.
Amanda Knox was found guilty.
As the verdict was read, Amanda Knox and her family began to sob.
But the saga didn't end there. Amanda had her conviction overturned in 2011, only to be brought back to trial just 2 years later in 2013.
The convicted killer, Amanda Knox, was back in court today.
But in 2015, it all came to a close. After a total of 4 years in jail and 8 years on trial, Amanda and Raffaele were found innocent by the Italian Supreme Court. With Rudy Gedde held solely responsible for the murder of Meredith Kercher.
Such an incredible story. 3 years on, and Amanda is a free woman settling back into normal life, and she's now working as a journalist. She's launched a new web show. It's called The Scarlet Letter Reports, opening up about her treatment by the media and interviewing other women who have gone through public shaming. And we are very honoured to say that Amanda joins us now from Seattle. Amanda, great to see you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Let's get into this case first, Amanda. You know, it's been 3 years since it was closed. You're finally a free woman. That moment, after everything you'd been through, what was that like?
Oh, God, it was life-changing, honestly. We weren't expecting it to happen so soon, which sounds crazy because it took 8 years on trial for this to come to a close. But the Supreme Court in Italy took a very strong, definitive stance saying we're putting an end to this insanity. We know that there's no evidence that me or Raphael had anything to do with this, so they really did put a firm stance, put a firm foot down and say, we're done with this.
We need to remember that you were just 20 years old, you were in a foreign country, your friend had been murdered and you were the prime suspect. That must have been incredibly scary. I mean, what do you remember from that time?
Gosh, I remember that it took me ages to really wrap my mind around what was happening to me, which is so common in wrongful convictions cases where an innocent person finds themselves in situations where you'd think, like, oh, of course, they must be suspecting that something is wrong. Like, you're in an interrogation room, people are yelling at you even, or in my case, slapping me. And it is so horrifying of an idea that you could be accused of something so terrible to someone that you cared about. You come up with any other excuse possible. That I was ready to believe that I was crazy before I was ready to believe that I was a prime suspect of a murder. Mm-hmm. It was incredibly difficult.
I can see how raw this still is for you. You know, that documentary that we were showing clips of there that you're a part of is really quite essential viewing. In it, though, the media were quick to paint, and I hate to bring it up, but that name, Foxy Knoxy, that they used to sort of brand you with so that they could get headlines or clicks or, you know, get people attention to the trial, and they sort of used that. How damaging was that to you and your chances of a fair trial?
Oh, there were 2 years that before I actually reached a conviction, 2 years where I was trapped in a prison cell, really unable to speak up for myself and to speak out against this incredible onslaught of character assassination that was happening in the courtroom and outside the courtroom. I was powerless against that. There was no proving who I was to a world that was putting on me their fears and their fantasies and drawing this picture of a person to make sense of a tragedy that didn't make sense.
Amanda, there was a lot, of course, that was lost in translation. When you were first charged, you actually learnt to speak fluent Italian while you were behind bars, which you later put to good use on the stand. Do you think that helped your case in court?
I think so, because the fact that I was unable to understand what was being asked of me and that I was unable to make myself understood really allowed for there to be this disconnect between me and the authorities and between me and the jurors. It was incredibly devastating. But, you know, these kinds of things also aren't necessary to, like, crack someone. I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a great, speaking of Netflix documentaries, there's a great Netflix documentary called The Confession Tapes,
yes,
which looks specifically at police interrogation techniques and how you don't have to be, you know, terribly young, although terribly young people end up getting manipulated so much easier, or people who have less intelligence. So you can be a regular human being out in the world doing the best thing you can, innocent, and find yourself in an interrogation room and be cracked, because it really is a systematic process that we really should address in all criminal justice systems around the world.
Yeah, well said too. You know, Amanda, you spent that time in prison, which I can't imagine what that was like for you as a 20-year-old. 4 years. And you know, you leave that time with Raphael, who you hadn't spent much time with. Do you two keep in contact since that verdict?
Oh, sure. I mean, Raphael is living his life in Italy, so we obviously don't see each other very often, but we keep track of each other and we care deeply about each other. Like, the thing that people don't know is me and Raphael met each other less than a week before we were arrested. And so we barely knew each other. In fact, our relationship is almost entirely a relationship of survival. And that means that we have a really particular strength and also pain that we have associated with each other. So it's an interesting
bond
relationship where the thing that we hold, we are most bonded by trauma.
Yes.
Which is kind of the same thing that I'm finding myself opening up to other people's experiences of trauma. And that's kind of what brought me to do the Scarlet Letter reports.
Amanda, let's just go back to the 4 years that you spent in prison, as David mentioned. Now, I want to know what that experience was like for you, and do you still harbour anger at the fact that you've lost that time in your life?
I mean, absolutely. You know, it's interesting because while I was in the prison environment, anger was a luxury that I couldn't afford, because it was so devastating to be in that condition, to think that my entire life had been rewritten, my past and my present and my future stripped of truth and hope, and to find myself having to reevaluate my life in the terms of the strictest, most punishing circumstances was an existential crisis. And I think that a lot of people who experience trauma have that moment of existential crisis where you thought that your world and your life was going to be one thing, and then suddenly everything that you knew is pulled out from underneath you. So to answer your question, I spent those years very numb from pain, that existential pain, and I had to come to be at peace and comfortable with the fact that my new emotional default setting was depression. And I've since come out of that, obviously thinking about that and trying to reorganize my life around freedom and anger, and, you know, justifiable anger. But the thing that has helped me is recognizing that anger is an informative emotion, but it is not the only emotion that I have about this entire experience. And the one emotion that has really helped me, even more than anger, to understand what happened to me is compassion and empathy. Now, if I really want to understand why what happened to me, I have to put myself in the shoes of the people who hurt me. I have to put myself in the shoes of my prosecutor, of the media, the journalist who completely stripped me of value and credibility. And I have to put myself in their shoes and think, why did they think they were doing the best they could do?
Yeah.
Well, what I like about this story now, Amanda, is that you just mentioned before that you are turning this into something as a positive, the Scarlet Letter reports. Talk to us a bit about this and why you decided to do it.
Oh, well, the Scarlet Letter reports is the first time that I'm actually able to talk about my own experience and put it out in the world in my own way, because usually what ends up happening is I'm interviewed and people want to talk to me about what happened, and not many people ask me, what do I think about what happened? And when I encounter other women or other exonerees who have gone through their experience, the thing that I think is missing from the discussion from trauma victims is, what do they think about what happened to them? What do they make of this experience, and what does it mean about the world?
Exactly.
And that is something so valuable. And when I reached out, I was working for Broadly, I was writing articles for them, mostly about women's experiences of the criminal justice system. I told them, hey, I would really love to write about other women who have been vilified in the media, particularly because when people talk about my case, they go, oh, it's so terrible what happened to you, you weren't asking for it. But those other people, they were asking for it. And that's shocking to me.
Exactly.
Because no one's asking for that.
No, Amanda, in the show you interview several celebrities about their experiences as well as your own. Let's just have a quick look at that.
I was looking into the issue of people shaming and vilifying women through their sexuality.
And I got to a point, like, as I got older, when I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna let those derogatory labels hurt me anymore. I'm just gonna embrace them.
I was like, you know, as you can imagine, completely devastated. I was afraid. It was a lot of things. It was a mixture of emotions.
I felt like I was alone in the world. I was isolated. I was scared. I could not make sense what was happening to me.
Well, you said that you were quite nervous, Amanda, about speaking to those women. Why was that?
Well, these women are women who are big, important, like, I'm not a celebrity, I'm just a regular person, and there are people out there in this world who seem like they're larger than life. And that's a little bit the reason why we feel a little bit entitled to, like, nitpicking them and attacking them and consuming them. And these women, you know, I wasn't sure what they were going to think of me. The fact that they even agreed to speak to me, to tell their most intimate stories with me, was incredibly touching and moving. Because, you know, they were agreeing to talk to Foxy Knoxy.
Yes.
Well,
They were agreeing to engage with me despite what the media had done to me.
Exactly.
And the fact that they were willing to do that and then share these, like, most deeply intimate traumas in their life, where they are putting themselves on a real human level and saying, look, I'm just a person just like you. I saw what happened to you. I can relate to that. Like, I was very moved that they made that gesture towards me as well.
Absolutely. And Amanda, we're very moved that you joined us today. We're about to lose you, but thank you so much for your time and sharing your story with Australia. We so appreciate it, and thank you. We're sorry for what you've been through, but what you're doing is remarkable. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda.
You can watch the Scarlet Letter
You're
Report.
so sweet. Thank you.
Thank you. You can watch the Scarlet Letter Report on Facebook.com/the Scarlet Letter Reports. That was just amazing.
It's fascinating, isn't it?